Welcome everyone to the webinar where we're going to talk about the Canada Revenue Agency today and a little bit about how to navigate them. My name is Lynn Webb. I'm your host today. So this webinar is live. So anything could happen as it goes live. We could have the phone ring or something happen with technology, but I wanted you to know that it definitely is live. So when I'm not looking at the camera, I need you to know what I'm looking at. So on this side here is the same screen that you see. So often I'll be talking. On this side right here is my notes and a lot of the logistics that happen with a webinar. And then I have another screen down below which tells me what you see. So if I'm not looking at the camera, you'll know what I'm looking at. So cross your fingers. May technology be good to us today. Okay, so let's get started into the content. So there is a poll which I'm going to put up on the screen right now. And what I'd just like you to do is to sort of give me an idea about where you're at with the Canada Revenue Agency. Some of this material I ad-lib as I go. I mean, I do have a presentation, but I always like to make sure it's very customized towards people. So if you have a particular area that you would like to see, sort of letting me know on this survey where you're at will let me know exactly what I should be talking about. Okay, perfect, thank you very much. So while you guys are voting, and we always get some latecomers, I also want to let you guys know that I have a cold. Coughing or my voice is a little bit off, you might get another screen that comes up and I'll just mute you and say, hold on a second. We'll try to cope as well as we can with this webinar. It's pretty good today, so I'm hopeful. Okay, so that's great. All right, so there's also on your webinar form, there's a place where you can actually do a Q&A or a chat. Either one, I see them both as you come in. So I'm able to sort of see the questions, and I do keep an eye on it, and we do have a Q&A right at the very end. So if there's anything that you really, really wanted to know, throw it in the chat or in the Q&A. Okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit about the CRA. Now this applies to business. So if you're here for your personal taxes, we don't talk at all about personal taxes today. Everything is about people who are in business. We're going to talk about what trouble means and the difference between compliance and collections, which is actually a super important topic for all business owners to know. We're going to talk about what happens in a trust exam or an audit. And we're going to talk about the steps that you need to take. Even if you think you're getting into trouble or you can't pay your taxes, here's the steps you need to take. We'll give you some real actionable things at the end. We also have a bonus course that I give to all people who attend the webinars. And this is a little bit about how to do your books. Now, you think, well, what has that got to do with me? I'm not doing it. But lots of times, one of the first symptoms about people that get into trouble is that your books are not done. In fact, in my opinion, you know, after 10 years of being in this professional business and hundreds of clients, that's usually the first sign that something is going wrong, is that the shoebox gets bigger and nothing's happening with it. And then it's costly to get it done. So this particular bonus will tell you how to sort them and how to get them ready to get them done. So it's actually really valuable. A little bit about me. Again, my name is Lynn Webb. I'm an author, an educator, and an entrepreneur. So I've owned several businesses. My love is in coaching. I love to work with small business people and just to sort of fill them in on what needs to happen with their business. One of my biggest pet peeves is when you go into business, there's no real good form of education. So, you know, when you register your company, nobody tells you what the rules are with CRA, for example. And of helping small business owners put a little bit more money in their pocket and a little less money off in taxes or wasted expenses. So it's kind of what I do. Now, one of the things that I say almost in every webinar, and it's so critically important, is you are legally responsible. And I know you know that, but the part where it really comes in is you have to understand in the process of doing business and doing your taxes, excuse me, in that entire process, the entire thing falls on your shoulders. It doesn't matter if your accountant did the tax return wrong. or your bookkeeper did your books wrong, the liability for the interest and penalties still falls on your shoulders. And so I always try to remind people how it applies to them. And in this particular case, it applies to you because if there's something going wrong with CRA, my bookkeeper did it or my accountant did it, is not really a valid excuse. And in that line, also you should know that if you went to 5 different accountants, you would get 5 different tax returns. And there's a really good reason for that. The Income Tax Act is, means yay big. And we all learn it in school. But then what happens is you take that book knowledge out into the real world, and now you have to interpret it. So now you have to kind of say, what was that? And there's a lot of thinking that's involved. And you have to interpret the tax rules, and everybody interprets them ever so slightly differently. But reasonable can mean different things to different people. So it's important that when you're working with someone from a tax perspective, or even a bookkeeping perspective, that you work with somebody who gels with you, somebody who can help you, and somebody who understands you. I also need to do a disclaimer on this particular webinar. This is general information only. It is not any substitute for legal or accounting or professional advice. Every situation is ever so slightly unique and different. I'm going to give you what the general rules are and how it applies to you, and then you can, in turn, use that knowledge to have a good conversation with your professional. So whenever you're dealing with anything to do with the Canada Revenue Agency, you're feeling like it's a little bit dicey, you really need to check in with your professional. Okay, so starting off, we're going to talk about the ways to have challenges. There's really 3 basic ways that you can get in trouble with the CRA. Number 1 is not filing your paperwork. Number 2 is when you don't pay money to them, but to trust money to them. We're going to explain what trust money is. And number 3, when you just simply don't pay your taxes, so you owe them money. Not doing your paperwork is something that they call non-compliant. We do a whole sections on non-compliant, but that particular piece says even if you pay the money, so even if you pay your taxes and you give the money for your GST, you still have to file the paperwork. And it's simply a required piece of the equation. And when you don't, they say that you are non-compliant. And again, don't worry about that too much just now. We're going to explain it in the next little section. There's 4 basic areas that you can cause issues. The first one is in GST. This is a really common one. So not only could you owe them money, but often what happens is that you don't file your GST reconciliation, and that just means the paperwork for GST. You fill out all this stuff and you send it off to the government. Sometimes people don't file that. It is common, actually, that excuse me, it's common that people will just simply send them the money and they won't actually file the paperwork, but there's a penalty, and it's called a failure to file penalty for not doing that. So that's one area. Another area is payroll. So once you start to get employees, from the first day you get employees, you have to be able to do the payroll properly and send the payroll off to the Canada Revenue Agency on time. And it's usually due on the 15th of each month for the majority of small business owners. That's when it's due. Or you have to file a T4 at the end of the year. So when you're not doing that, that's a good way to capture their attention if you're not doing that properly. A third area is corporate tax. So the corporate tax is when you are incorporated and you have your taxes are done at the end of the year and you file them. That's called corporate tax. Generally speaking, this is kind of a confusing area, and I throw it in not necessarily because I need to, because it's interesting and people always say, what? That really happens? And it really does. So in the corporate tax, your corporate tax is due for most companies 3 months after your year end. So if your year end was February, so you count 3 months, March, April, May. So you would have to pay your taxes at the end of May. But the tax return isn't due for 6 months. So that would be June, July, August. So in 3 months. So it's a little bit backwards. But it is true, and there's some good reasons for it. So most accountants or bookkeepers will say to you, just simply pay and do your taxes in 3 months. It's quite frankly the simplest. But as an area also that people have to pay, and then there's some weird rules about paying it monthly, etc. So sometimes people don't do that, and that can capture their attention. And then, of course, there's personal tax as well. And the personal tax has to be paid by April 30th of each year. Now, if you're a sole proprietor, meaning you are in business for yourself and you are not incorporated, your taxes are due by January 15th. Hold on. Your taxes are due to be done by June 15th of each year, not January, I'm sorry, but they still have to be paid by April. So that's a little bit of a difference. Okay. So those are the areas, again, GST, payroll, corporate tax, and personal tax are the areas where you can kind of get a little bit in trouble. Now, this is a really important area to understand about CRA, and it's compliance versus collections. And I mean, they change certainly all the time, but they're actually sort of two departments, I guess you could say. So compliance is making sure that your paperwork is done and that you have declared to the Canada Revenue Agency everything that you are making. So the reason there's a late filing fee, for example, on GST, would be saying, well, thanks for the money, but what were your sales and how much money did you really owe us? So if you're sitting in Canada Revenue Agency's shoes, you actually don't know how much the customer owes you. You just know you got a payment. I want to see your paperwork, ABC Company, whatever your company name is, so that I know how much, like what your state is in, and that you're up to date and compliant. Okay, so that's what compliance is. They want to know what your numbers are. They want to make sure all of your paperwork is filed so they can see the state of your company. Collections is super easy. Collections is just simply money that you owe to the Canada Revenue Agency. Believe it or not, collections is actually the easier of the two to navigate, in my opinion. We see it all the time. People don't file because they're scared they're going to owe money, but not filing is actually more difficult to deal with than just simply paying them, because when you're not filing, they start to get fairly aggressive about knowing where you stand, about where are you, how much money do you owe. They can be really, really aggressive. In collections, I only ever really see them get aggressive if you ignore them and you don't pay attention to them. That's my opinion only, based upon what I've seen with customers. But compliance is just, in my opinion, way more problems, way more trouble. Do all the paperwork, they assess your penalties, they get you up to date, and then they do the collection of the money. So then it's dealt with sort of after you're compliant. So a compliance officer, which is usually who you'll be talking to, they're going to be asking you a lot of questions, trying to see, where are you at, making sure that the filing is done. They're going to give you some deadlines, and they're going to try to get a commitment from you. So for example, if you don't have your GST done, they're going to say, when can you file that GST? And you're going to say, you look at the clock, today's March 28th, you say, okay, I'll get it done by Tuesday, or whatever day. I'll get it done by Tuesday. So Tuesday comes along and they still don't have it. That's a serious breach, and it's not taken lightly in CRA world. So whatever you say you're going to do, you need to stick to it. You say that GST return is going to be done on Tuesday, you make sure that GST return is done on Tuesday. Does that make sense? So just always, it's kind of a serious thing. Don't ignore them. Probably the worst thing you can do with CRA is ignore them. They will continue to be more and more aggressive to get your attention, so don't ignore them. Now, if you are kind of getting in trouble and you're behind and there's challenges, always seek out a professional. But here's another really good thing that can happen, and we did it so many times, is often you get a third-party person involved, and lots of times we would call the agent or the officer that you were dealing with, and we would say, we have their stuff, we've got it, you've given them a deadline of 7 days, let's just say that was the deadline. we can't do it in 7 days. We need a month, or we need 2 months or 6 weeks or whatever time period. So we would give them a reasonable time period. And most of the time, as long as it was reasonable, they would grant us that to say, okay, but that's your deadline, which is okay. Once you put a professional in there, we understand how serious that is. So then we would meet that deadline. So sometimes going to a third party, you can get some help and maybe buy a couple days by asking for them to sort of intervene, and maybe not intervene, but certainly help you. But again, we're going to give it reasonable. And, lots of times your professional will say to you, but I need to be paid first, right? And don't be surprised. So if you are in trouble, there's a financial issue. So if you go to a bookkeeper, they might say, I will help you and I will make that call, but you need to pay me $3,000 first upfront for my work. So just kind of know that if you're kind of getting that call, you're going to have some access to funds, most likely, before a lot of people will do that work for you and give that deadline. But this can be a really cool strategy to sort of say, all right, I know I have to fix this, and how can I do that? If you're behind and if you're getting a call from CRA, or if you need to get it done, you got to put some time, money, and energy into getting that shoebox organized and filed and done. There's not much that you can tell the CRA if your books are not done. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for your tax return. They're looking for your GST return. They're looking for your records. They're looking for something. So spend some time and energy and money in getting your shoebox organized and filed. Once it's filed, in my opinion, CRA is way easier to deal with, I think, when you said, here, listen, let me get the stuff for you. I need X. And I tell you, it takes a lot of stress off in trying to deal with them. So collections is the process of collecting the money to CRA. And almost always, from what I can tell, and every situation is different, but CRA will take a payment arrangements. And I've seen payment arrangements for huge amounts of money. And I think for the most part, generally speaking, they want to get it done in 6 months. So if you owed them $1,200 and you could say, well, I can't really pay that, but I'll pay you $200 a month, that's pretty reasonable. But if you owe them $100,000 and you say, I'm going to give you $200 a month, that's not reasonable any longer. So they might be a little more aggressive there. So whatever you do, though, commitment to them. So if you say it's $200 and that's reasonable to you, you got to stick to your guns and say, what can we do? Because I can't pay you $10,000 a month. I can only pay you $200. I know that's a very drastic example. But that's what I mean about be reasonable, because they're looking for a reasonable thing for you to do to get caught up. But what they're not looking for is a broken commitment. So just make sure you keep it reasonable. Because once you promise to pay them for something, if you say, I'm going to pay you $10,000 a month because, oh, you just want to get off the phone. Okay, hey, I'll pay you $10,000 a month. And the first month you do it, the second month you don't. That's a breach again. And they usually will take action when you don't make your promise, even when it's a verbal promise. So always communicate with them, keep your payment reasonable, and don't miss payments. And if you do, you gotta call and you gotta communicate with them. Because once you're in trouble and once you have an agent assigned to your file, that's an active file. They don't forget about you, even though we like to think that they do, but they don't forget about you. They have a file that's active on their desk. They've been assigned to make your file come compliant and a collection arrangement made. Okay, so that was trust exam. I just want to quickly check in and see what we have here in terms of questions or anything. Okay, perfect. All right, good. So let's go on. So I want to talk a little bit about audits and trust exams, because this is a really confusing area for some people. But if you're not compliant or you owe money, chances are pretty good you're going to get to the place where they're going to do an audit or a trust exam. So let's talk about what they are. So a trust exam is hands down the most common that I've seen. The trust exam is where they send out an examiner and they look at all your books and records, and what they're looking for very specifically is payroll and GST. And why? Because payroll and GST are called trust monies. So the trust money is where you're collecting money, but it's not really yours. So, you took payroll and you take it off the employee's check. It's not your money. It's the employee's money, so it should be remitted. And the same thing with GST. You collect GST on behalf of the government, and then you send it. It's not your money. So they call those trust monies. So what they'll do is they send somebody out to examine your payroll and GST records. They do an assessment of what they think you owe. They assign you penalties and interest on the amount that they think that you owe. So normally payroll issues is the one that triggers the trust exam. In most cases, GST can as well, but normally it's payroll issues that trust it. And here are some of the common reasons that trigger a trust exam. So the first one is that you are not paying remittances regularly. So you are not sending in on the 15th of each month the money that you owe Revenue Canada. So that is a common one. Or you owe them more than $5,000. So if they understand that you owe them more than $5,000, they might send out an examiner to come figure out what's happening. You have a questionable discrepancy. Something happens with payroll that comes to their attention, and it's questionable. And they're saying, well, why is this, and that? We don't know. We better send out an examiner to take a look. If they suspect something is excuse me, is where you're not doing anything. So you opened up a payroll account, but you're not sending any payroll to them. So they might question and say, what's happening? Or you're not compliant, and this is a huge one, non-compliance again. They want to get you compliant, and if you're not going to tell them what you owe, they're going to send somebody out to see. So those are the common reasons that I've seen with trust exams. Now, here's what happened. If you get a call from an examiner, here's really what's going to happen. They are going to come out and they're going to request all of your banking records. And they want not your record, they want your bank statements. They're going to look on the bank statement for anything that you have paid out to individuals or subcontractors quite often. Then what they do is they plug those numbers into their program and they say, here, based upon the fact you've paid these people, here's what we think your payroll should have been, all right? And they do it right, usually current, so if let's say they come out and they looked at last year's records, they would do it all the way to, this is March 28th, they would do it all the way to February, the end of February for this year. Sometimes they will often look at your GST as well, but they basically do that whole assessment and then they give you, they will reissue a T4 slip if the year has gone by, and then you're on the hook for whatever money. Now, interesting note, I've always said to people, and we have in our eSchool course a whole module on payroll versus subcontractors. If you have a subcontractor here and you're paying them and you do not have a contract in place, I highly recommend that you do it now. Because if you pay, Sally Smith, for example, and you call Sally Smith a contractor, when the trust exam is done and they look at your bank and they say, oh, you paid Sally Smith, the onus is up to you to prove that Sally Smith is a contractor. And just simply saying, well, she doesn't, and she only comes in part-time, and she's hit and miss, that doesn't really cut it. You're really going to want to make sure you have some proof. That's really important when the trust exams are done. In an audit, this is a different scenario. So an audit, they come and they look at your complete books and records. They not only ask for business, but they usually will ask for personal banking records too. So if you're at the stage of an audit, sometimes people get audited because they're just looking, but a lot of times people get audited because they've done so much wrong that by the time you get to an audit situation, they're really looking for some information. So they're going to be looking for all of your business and your personal records. They're looking for something. They're looking to find something. Come to your place of business. I've even heard of people's computers being seized and their equipment being seized. Now, I don't know what situation that's under, but I'm saying they do come And they do all of this, and an audit is invasive. A business audit is anyway. I'm not talking about personal audits. It's invasive. There's a lot of stuff you have to produce. They're always asking for information. They want, copies of this and copies of that. And if you're disorganized at all, it really is a real pain. One thing that I will tell you is if you're being audited and you've been notified you've been audited, I would always recommend you just suck it up and you go to your accountant and you say, you got to handle this. Because the accounting professional knows, and we get a good sense about what they're looking for, and we provide the right information to them. And lots of times you might provide the wrong information to them, or just not necessarily too much, but just, how you've got a story in your head and then you spend 20 minutes trying to get that story out, but if somebody else were to tell the same story, it would take 2 minutes. That kind of stuff happens. So an accounting professional will deal with it factually and swiftly, and they also know how to compare you to all the other audits that they do. So when something's going awry, and it does often, when they're saying something's not right, this auditor is not giving me the right information, or I'm not feeling good, the accountant is the person who can really push that on your behalf. You would never know if it's going right or if it's going wrong, right? And don't be a passive person. You have to be a passive person, but don't be passive in saying whatever Revenue Canada does, they do. Always make sure you get an accounting professional involved in the audit. So that was kind of a sort of a long, drawn out story for saying, an audit is serious. So you want to make sure that you have somebody involved. Okay, just going to check in quickly with questions here. Chris, I see your question. I'll get to you. I will get to you at the end. Thank you very much. Okay, so far we've covered kind of the general areas of Canada Revenue Agency. If you remember, GST, payroll, corporate tax, personal tax. We've covered compliance versus collections. So compliance being you filed your paperwork properly, and collections being you just simply owe the money, which is, in my opinion, the lesser of the two evils. We've covered trust exams and audits and the difference between those. You are far more likely to get a trust exam than you are to get an audit, I think, certainly from what I've seen. So what we haven't covered yet, we're going to talk about is kind of an action plan and the steps to take, even if you feel you're going down that rabbit hole. You don't even have to be in trouble. When your gut says, oh, I'm getting a tax bill, I don't know how I'm going to pay it, you're kind of already starting that rabbit hole. So we're going to talk about the steps and sort of the things that you should be doing in the order you really should be doing them. However, from a resources standpoint, because when you hang up your computer or your phone or whatever you're on, and you're going to go out into the world, we have really an hour together, and I always commit to have these webinars done in an hour or less. So the amount that you need to learn here, quite possibly it can't be really done in an hour, but it can be done in a few hours with some guidance. So I want to leave you with some resources, which is an opportunity for you. The main product that we offer one of the main products that I offer is a product called eSchool. Right-hand side is 12 modules, and then we have a bunch of bonus modules, which are really screenshots of how to. But these are the 12 basic modules and the areas that they cover. So we talk a little bit about, the fundamentals of business. We talk about things like the personal tax, like high level, understanding what that means. We do go into great detail in the Canada Revenue Agency. We talk about how do I choose my bookkeeper, my accountant, or write-offs. Now, write-offs is a huge one that a lot of people are always so curious about. We have a promotion, by the way, coming up with write-offs. Not a promotion, but we have a huge blitz, that's what I'm trying to say, blitz on write-offs, which is going on right now in our Facebook group, where we're telling you a lot of really in-depth things. So if you wanted to go check that out, we do have a group that you would just join. We also, it talks about bookkeeping and the DIY, like kind of do it yourself, and it talks about how you save tax. Module 12 is all about how you get your money out of the company. Now that's the cost for that is $297, but on our webinars, which is the place most people see it, we do a 30% off, which is only runs for the next 72 hours. And this is the coupon code. So just, you can jot that down, but you'll also get an email right after this, which will give you the replay, and that coupon code is in there. So that's the coupon you would use to get 30% off. Now, the other side is sometimes you don't necessarily, like this is a course and you take this at your leisure and it's an online course, but sometimes people want to learn in real time. So we do have a live classroom, and it's done by weekly webinars. It starts April the 10th. And this is, I teach this live and online right at the rate card. We don't have any more than 10 people in the classroom because there's always a lot of questions, and after 10 people, it gets a little harder to manage. We have some individual attention so we can hear what your particular situation is and how it applies to you. You, of course, get all free access to the course as well, and our Facebook group. So this is a really good one. Starts April 10th. I think I have 3 seats left, if I recall. Right now, it's normally $497. Again, off the replay, or sorry, off the webinar. You have 72 hours, and you can get 30% off the live and online version as well. So just watch for that to come out in your email. The other place that I always get asked about is coaching. And yes, I do direct coaching. And there's really 3 ways you can coach with me. So one of them is through the webinars. These are released every Wednesday. But I also do direct coaching, which I do in 1 hour, half an hour, or sessions of 3. But I do group coaching as well, which is really 3 different companies that I try to match as close as I can. We'll have anywhere between 1 and 2 hours for 3 sessions, and you can learn from other people. So we try to match your situation as close as we can with other people, but absolutely coaching is available if you want it. And this is the link you go to, linweb.ca/coaching. Now, in the webinar, when you signed up, there was a question to say if you wanted to stay involved. And sometimes people check no because, you know, it's a new webinar. We don't know each other very well. But then when you see the webinar, there's a lot of information, there's huge resources, and I love to do this job. So I am always trying to find good tips and tricks for small business owners. So if you did check no and you're thinking, oh darn, I wish I could get more information, this is the link where you go to. It's linweb.ca/join-us, and you just re-sign up again, and then you'll get it all. If you said, no, I just want the webinar, you're going to get the emails only pertaining to this webinar, and then you don't hear from us again. So I wanted just to make sure that you had an opportunity, that if you want some information, if you wanted to continue to get notified about future webinars, which run every Wednesday, then you would need, of course, to make sure you're signed up with us. Okay, so so we covered the CRA, the trust exams, we covered the compliance issues. Now let's talk about your action steps. So what should you be doing? So the first thing is filling out a spreadsheet to figure out what you owe. I'm going to show you that spreadsheet in just a second, and you're going to get it on the replay email. You're going to get an opportunity to download the spreadsheet, and this is exactly what I'm working through. So when you get the email, you can download the spreadsheet and you can watch the replay, and you'll be able to kind of work through it. So I'm going to work through it here, even though you haven't seen the sheet yet. The first section says, tell me what I really owe. Now, I've helped so many people out of issues with CRA, and the very first thing we do is we get a high-level picture to say, what do you really owe? Because if you owe like $3,000, to you it's like, oh, it's $3,000, but to me it's like, oh, it's nothing, you know, because I see what a lot of the companies out there, I see how far in debt they possibly could be. So $3,000 to me is not a lot of money on what the actions are as a professional. So lots of times people come to me and they're in trouble, and they pay for me to coach them. And the very first thing I do says, where are you at? So in the 4 areas, GST, payroll, corporate tax, and personal tax, the first line says, what do I owe? Get a grip on that first. What do I really owe? Then the second line says, what do I think I'm going to owe soon? And soon is up to you. I always suggest soon is in the next year, because it might take you a year to pay it off. And if you're making a financial commitment to CRA, they're going to ask for a financial commitment today. And the second $1 more comes owing, they're going to ask you for a commitment on that as well. So when you know how much you owe versus what you're going to owe, you have a really good picture about what does that all look like. So when you make a financial commitment to CRA, you know exactly where you're at for the next year. So when they're asking you for a 6-month or a 9-month commitment, you have all the numbers already in place. So this is the first thing that I do, hands down. Tell me where you're at, tell me how much more you need so that we can get a good picture. So this example I've used, you can see when you look at all the different areas, this person owes, about, let's say about $16,000 in tax. So now I'm like, okay, you owe $16,000. Now we know what we're up against. That's about $1,200, $1,300 a month, which might be reasonable to you or it might not be reasonable, but at least you understand what you can do. Excuse me. Okay, the second part of the spreadsheet says, in all those areas of tax, figure out the last time you paid them, and I want to know the next 3 payments. So I want to know, and only for a year, so only go, from now and out a year. So for example, this is just example data. Let's say you had GST, and the last time you paid it was July 31st, and you're a quarterly remitter, so you know your next 3 payments are going to be about $1,500 each. So you now owe $4,500. So you have an idea of when this is due and how much it's going to be. You do the exact same thing for every category. So you can see payroll, we owe about $1,500. Corporate tax, we've got the date a full year ahead. So you can see the corporate tax we're going to owe for the next year, $3,000. And personal tax for the next year, we're going to owe about $7,000. So now we see at a glance, the last sheet we saw, we said, this is how much you're going to owe. And this sheet breaks it down so that you know by date when those dates are going to come up so that you have to pay them. Now, these 2 are so critical to do. I cannot even possibly underestimate how critical these 2 steps are to do. And I know they're a little bit of a pain, but you want to get a handle on what's going to happen in the next year. You got to do these. Even if you think, oh, I think I'm going to owe taxes, I'm not sure. Sit down and do these 2 charts, and it gives you such incredible clarity that you wouldn't believe when I do these and I give these to a client in its simplest form. The client's like, oh, well, that's not so bad. I thought it was going to be way more. Or the client will say, oh, that really sucks. Okay, but now I know, so it's kind of like dealing with the devil you know rather than the devil you don't know. So this is these 2 steps are actually really, really huge to do. Now, one of the things in our eSchool, if you decide to go into eSchool, module 3 or 4 is all about the Canada Revenue Agency, and there's a bonus module in eSchool which also tells you how to figure it out. So we go through every one of those and we break down what are the deadline dates and when do you owe. And you might think, for example, corporate tax is once a year, but it's not. You actually owe corporate tax every month. And if you're not paying them every month, then at the end of the year when your accountant does your tax return, that comes out whether you've paid it, and then you get charged interest. But you don't know it because it's just part of that tax number. But there are other charges. So little things like your corporate taxes could be due every month. Then if you don't know that, how do you know what you really owe, if that makes sense? So there's a couple modules in our eSchool which specifically teach you how to do that. This next step you want to do is register for a CRA login. Now we're going to do a little bit of a technology switch here, so just a minute. Now the CRA login, I'm shocked at how few people have them, and what I want to do is I just want to show you what that looks like. So let me just hope technology is good to me here. Perfect. So if you go to cra.gc.ca, you will come to this screen. And once you click your language of preference, down here on the right-hand side, there's this thing called My Account and My Business Account. So the My Account will get you into your personal tax situation. So it's got nothing to do with business, the My Account. It's got everything to do with personal. And you'll be able to log on, you can get your notice of assessments, you'll see what your RSP limits are, how much money you've put into your TFSA, shows you what money you owe, you can make payments there. Like, it does all kinds of stuff, which is really cool. And then once you get your My Account set up, and by the way, it takes like 5 to 10 days because you register and then they mail you, like Canada Post mail, to your box a code, and you have to put that code in to get access. So once you, when you get that, then you go to My Business Account, and when you go to My Business Account, then you will log in with your brand new login and you will register your business. So whenever you are working with CRA, then you can look at anything and everything to do with your personal or your business. It's super cool. And if you're a business without this, you're missing out because there's so much information on there. It's great. Now let me switch back here. Let's see if I can find it. Did we do? Perfect, great, okay. So here's that screen that we talked about. Again, it's just the Canada Revenue Agency site. On the right-hand side, these are the two that you want to register for. This is what it looks like behind the scenes. So this is the personal one, and you can see, it tells you what your last tax returns are and whether you've had a refund or you've had to pay. It tells you your tax returns, your accounts and payments, any benefits or credits. So if you have kids and you're getting the child benefit, tax benefit, then it'll be in here. It talks about the RSPs and the TFSAs and really anything like that. There's all kinds of stuff. You can change your address, you can apply for benefits, tons of stuff you can do on here. This year when you do your taxes, your tax preparer probably says, do you want to give them your email address? And this is where you get your emails. So you'll see here, this person has 2 unread items. That's where your email from Revenue Canada goes. They don't actually email it to your inbox. They email you something that says, hey, you have a message. So then you have to log into this account and you have to get your message. So probably your tax preparer would ask you for it because all of our tax stuff kind of changed a little bit this year, and it's part of what we need to do now. So this is your personal. This is My Account. That's what it looks like personally. The business looks like this. So this is the business account, and you would have GST, you'd have income tax. If you had payroll, you'll have another section. And if you do exports, you'll have another section. And look at all the good stuff in here. I mean, it's good stuff to me because I do this all the time. I get very excited about this because it's good stuff. For you, you're thinking, oh, I have a headache. But there's good stuff in here. If you want to do your GST, you can file it here. You can see what is up and coming. You can manage your payments. You can do the account balance and activities. I gotta say, I think the CRA has done a really good job with the GST and the corporate tax on this system. Their payroll is a little outdated still, but this contains some really good information on your company. So you don't have to dial 1-800-CRA, I'm on hold, and then get an agent who has to look it up, which sometimes can be laborious. Like, we're business people, let's face it, we're busy. So this is the business side of it, and I really, really think this is an excellent service. Well worth registering for. Another action step is to ask yourself, are you caught up to date? Do you have your books done? And are all your payments done? Do you know, or are you guessing? So many business owners, in my opinion, they're like, well, yeah, I'm up to date, but they're not. And And so you really have to know when you're up to date. Again, we do talk about that in Module 4 the Canada Revenue Agency, but if you have a professional in your life, ask them, ask your accountant and say, what am I supposed to be doing? You know, am I supposed to be doing monthly or what, like where, you know, I had a client just this morning that I was doing some coaching for who said to me, I said, when do you file your GST? And he's like, oh, yearly, I don't have to do that till August. And I said, well, hold on. Based upon the money you're making, even if you file yearly, you still have to pay them quarterly. So you're already 2 payments late. And he's like, what? Like he had no clue. He thought he was up to date, but he wasn't because GST has to be paid quarterly. Even if you're a yearly filer, you still have to pay it quarterly under certain conditions. So always know if you're up to date or not up to date, because if you're not, they're just tacking on interest and penalties, and quite frankly, that sucks. So make sure you know. And your books, what if your books are caught up to date? If they're not, get them there. Anytime anything happens with CRA, the first place you go is to your books. The first place your professional goes is to your books. The first place CRA goes is to your books. Make sure your books are caught up to date. And if they're not, you really, really need to do something about that. Now, the reality is that if they're not caught up to date, there's usually a reason for it. And in small business, first start out, you're not making a ton of money. So, and it's expensive to have a bookkeeper and accountant, or it kind of seems like a waste of money. And hey, I get that. I mean, I get that. I've been in this industry forever. I understand. So there's a program that we always tell people, which is simple and easy. And a disclaimer on this is another company that I own. However, I built this based upon 10 years of experience of listening to what the client's concerns are. And I owned a professional bookkeeping firm. So I was telling people, you don't need me, go use this program. It's $10 a month, or, you know, whatever it happened to be. So this program was built to make life easy for people to track simply. It wasn't a big accounting software program that you had to buy into and learn double-sided accounting or enter. This was just simple. It's nothing more than a glorified spreadsheet. Really, at the end of the day, this is what it looks like. You, in the top side, you enter your receipt, and in the bottom side, they appear. And at the end of the year, it produces this beautiful, magical report that your accountant needs. So you would just print off this report and take this to your accountant and say, here's my books. So it's a wonderful way to get your books done efficiently, and I'll show you just where that is. Let me jump back. Technology, please be good to me. I think this is the screen. So DIY expense. And when you get here, you would just simply sign up for a free trial. And it takes you to this particular page. And you get, and you get, I think, a month for free trial. And then after that, it's relatively inexpensive. Let me just try to get back to my screen here. Okay. Great. So DIY Expense Tracker is a tool. You don't have to use that tool, but if money is an issue, that's a great tool to use, because I built it to make it simple, easy, and do all the things that we needed to do as an accounting professional, that we needed to have as an accounting professional. So if CRA is chasing you, make a payment arrangement, make a promise, make it reasonable. Say what you need to say, but don't overextend yourself. So, you know, you really want to make sure either you have a professional involved if you're really far in debt, but either way, you want to make sure that that payment is reasonable. Get compliant and stay compliant. You will have so much less stress if you are compliant, I promise you. Try to pay your current obligations in real time. So even if you're behind, lots of people think, I got to pay the old stuff off. Stop that. You have already incurred the penalties on the old stuff. They're already there. The only thing that's tagging along is interest. If you don't do your new stuff, you're going to get slammed with more penalties and more interest. The interest you're going to pay either way. The last thing you need is more penalties. So get your stuff done in real time. If you're behind on payroll and you haven't done your remittances for a couple months, I get that they want the money. I hear that and I get it. But if you don't pay your payroll in real time, you could be incurring penalties up to 20% every single month that you're not compliant. How will you ever get out of trouble like that? So pay your real stuff in real time, which is why I say you have to lay out, what am I going to owe for the next year? Remember that chart we looked at the beginning, and this is why. You're like, okay, I got to pay my current stuff, plus I have my old stuff. What does this look like? And have a real good picture, and definitely keep it reasonable. So people ask me, what do I pay and when do I pay it? And sometimes people say, I'm going to do the smallest amount first. And that's not necessarily a good way to do it. So every bill to CRA is important, and you own. I don't want to discount that. But the trust money tends to be higher on the pecking order with CRA. Remember, the trust money is payroll and GST. So from a penalty standpoint, they have higher penalties, but from a penalty standpoint, if it were me, this is how I would pay it in this order. And keep in mind, I have to disclaim this. This is a general opinion only. I always say my opinion and $5 gets you on a bus. It's my opinion only, but this is absolutely the way I would do it. And always get some professional help. Number one, I would pay any payroll that I had due and get that one caught up to date. Make your commitment and get it done. Number two, pay your GST. Those take care of the two trust monies. Number three, pay your personal tax. And number four, pay your corporate tax. So that's the order that I would pay it in. If I owed money in those particular areas, I would do it in this order. Again, consult your professional. If you're in a situation which is kind of really bad and you're thinking, this is hopeless, I don't even know, I owe all this money and I don't know how I'm going to pay it and it's hopeless, the place where you go is to a bankruptcy trustee. Now, a bankruptcy, it doesn't mean you're going to go into bankruptcy. It means these are the people that handle this situation. So they will look at your situation and decide, is it bankruptcy that you have to do? Because there's all kinds of liabilities with trust monies and, you know, what goes with the bankruptcy, what doesn't go with the bankruptcy. Can you own your house and RSP? Like all that stuff that goes into the equation. So you need to have a good understanding, but the bankruptcy trustee is the person that handles this. And you can do a proposal to CRA, which isn't bankruptcy. And what a proposal is, it's a payment arrangement that you make to pay off the outstanding amount over a period of time and an agreed amount. Now, it's a lot of words. That is, it is let's say you owe CRA $150,000, which happens all the time. And you're like, that's an overwhelming amount of money. And not only that, there's no way you're not even making that in sales. How could you possibly, owe that much money? But you do. So here's the action plan. You could go to them, and I'm not saying this is what happens, by the way. It's everybody's situation. I'm saying this is the process. So you go to a bank, stuff, what you owe, what you own, and into consideration. And they say, well, why don't we do a proposal to CRA that you're going to pay $100,000 over 5 years? Okay, let's just say that's what they suggest. So they present that to CRA. CRA agrees or doesn't agree, and then and then that's what you're going to pay. That's your commitment to them. And again, we talked about commitment. That's what you pay. So that is one thing that they will do for you. You could potentially have a proposal in place. Okay, some Q&A. I have a couple minutes just left, 5 minutes left. So let's try to wrap this up real quick. Chris says, I got a call from a trust person. What should I be doing? So I'm assuming this is not an auditor, Chris. So to the trust individual, a trust exam sounds scary, especially when CRA is calling you, but it really isn't. It's very factually based. Who did you pay? And because they're examining your banking records, it's pretty factual based. So really the step is they will come to your place of business and they will ask for your books and records and your bank statements. And they're going to have their laptop. They're going to go through it. They're going to record. There's no argument. It's factually based. Did you pay Sally Smith? Yes or no, right? And if you did, is she an employee or a subcontractor? And then if she's an employee, that amount goes in and they pay it. So I guess the first thing to do, take a deep breath and just know the trust exam is not as scary as it sounds. You might get interest and penalties out of it, and maybe you've done nothing right. But the reality is you're going to know. And you're not compliant, that's the scarier place to be. I mean, even if you owed them $20,000, make a payment arrangement and call it a day. So realistically, you want to arrange a time where they can come into a private place. They can have your undivided attention to ask questions. It's super important that you are available to them, because if you can't answer their question, or if you got to be like, oh, I got to look, and I got all this stuff going on, they're going to be like, I've only got 4 hours, so I'm going to assess you. So make sure you're available to them to ask questions, and just let them do their thing. And they will, you may not even know. Sometimes they have to take it back to the office. So take a deep breath, relax, give them your undivided attention, give them a private place to be so they can do their job, and then deal with whatever the aftermath is after it. Roberta asks, I think this is there's a little bit of a typo, but I've heard that this is too little, and if you owe them too little and they won't bother you. Oh, okay. So if you've heard that I don't owe them very much, so CRA won't bother me. So you're asking if that's true? If you can just confirm. Okay, great. Okay, thanks, Roberta. So no, that's not true. There are thresholds for everything. So CRA says if you owe more than $3,000, this happens. And if you owe more than $5,000, this happens. And if you owe more than $100,000, this happens. And if you do $1 million, that happens. But the reality is, at any level, when you owe taxes with CRA, it could be as simple as a phone call, or it could be somebody coming to do a trust exam. There are certainly, the less you owe, and I would say, I don't even want to say, the less you owe, the less likely they're going to chase you. But I would not agree that there's a point where they don't chase you at all. Certainly, the more you owe, the more attention you're going to get. So you always kind of want to stay up to date. I hope that answered your question. Okay, so that's it. Nice and easy on the questions today. Great. All right, so I promised you a bonus, and here it is. It is Module 10, the exact module from the course, the eSchool course, and it's called Do It Yourself Bookkeeping. So Do It Yourself Bookkeeping basically teaches you how you put your box together, how you get your shoebox the way you should be putting your paper together. We do talk about the different types of bookkeeping as well, and where that really applies to most people if you're in a business that takes deposits. So maybe you say, okay, I'm going to do this work, but I need half down. Then this definitely applies to you. You should watch that. And it applies to you, and you could pay more tax if you're not navigating that properly. Tells you how to sort it, tells you a little bit about how you kind of get it done. So it's that whole process. And especially when people owe to get books done. So this will get you halfway there. If you did everything that was in this video, your accounting bill would probably be cut in half, right? Because it would be nice and simple for someone to do. And that's pretty significant when you're talking several $1,000s a year. So there will be a link in the email which comes out, and when you click on it, you're going to get this screen, and on the right-hand side, you're going to click Join Now, and that's going to take you to this screen. Sometimes people get freaked out when they say, oh, I have to put this in. All of my programs are developed by they're behind on a third-party person. So they require this username and access for security. So what I want you to do is just put this in. I don't do anything with this email address. I'm not going to spam you. We don't sell it. We don't do anything. This is your access into the program. So you would just fill out this information, and then you will have the program. A quote that I always finish on with every webinar is this. A year from today, this is so good with taxes. I love this. A year from now, you're going to wish that you had started today. So when taxes come next year and you're feeling the stress, you get benefit and way more money in your pocket at the end of the year if you do things in real time when they're supposed to be done. If you wait till the end of year, you're going to pay more tax. It's really that's just the way it is. So you're going to wish you'd started today. So get started by downloading that free course, and that'll at least get you up and going. that's it for today. I am 2 minutes over time. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for being with me. As always, reach out. You can get access to the Facebook group where you can ask any question you like. That link will also be in the email. And next week, we're talking about more topics for small businesses. Every Wednesday, we have a webinar at 3 p.m. If you can't make it, you will always get the link to the replay as long as you register. Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. And we will see you next Wednesday. Take care.